So, hi, Mick Donnelly.
Hello there.
So we've worked together for a long time now, and you are renowned as a saxophonist because you've played with a lot of big names, and you've had a lot of great opportunities in your career. What really interests me is how you prepare for big events, and how you cope with nerves, or you don't have nerves, and why you don't. In fact, I know you don't have nerves. Why do you not have nerves?
It's mainly because preparation. Preparation to me is absolutely everything. It sort of goes back to my early teaching days when I was going through my cert ed, really. I mean, obviously before then, I'd done an awful lot of performing, but I'd already been prepared. I didn't know what I was doing in them early days. But in the more advanced time, I sort of, when your reputation precedes you, you feel as though, you're walking into it. You have no fear when you're young, and you sort of just walk in and you just do it because you've got nothing to lose.
So for you, it's all in the preparation. If you know you prepared well, then you know you can perform well.
Completely. Yeah.
So what makes for good preparation? What's your process? So let's say you're about to perform with somebody of significant note, whether it be Lisa Stansfield or Ross Dury or whoever it be, and you've been sent something that you're going to perform with a band. How do you start?
Usually, with a pop artist, there will be no particular music. The music will be as a guide at the beginning, so there'll be certain riffs if there's a horn section. If there's more than one player, not a soloist, you would have to get them things together. So you would have riffs and things that you perform, but there'd be no formal arrangement. So you would get some form of audio play, and either there's already a saxophone solo on there, or there's a saxophone part on there, or it's yours. I mean, the last two albums I did with Lisa Stansfield, it was me that was on them. So basically I was playing my own solos, so I shouldn't really have to have any music to prepare for that. So that was great. I could just listen to what I actually did on the actual recordings and go, I'll just emulate that because that's my style anyway. It gets a little bit more difficult when you're emulating someone else's style. Like the earliest stuff that she did, I wasn't on. So I've had to sort of incorporate that into my thing. So that all comes on the audio thing. So
that audio, that incorporation, and particularly picking up somebody else's style, that's an ear thing.
Yeah,
that's a listening skill.
Completely, and the more you listen to it, the more you get the actual arrangement, the more that you can actually put into it yourself as well. And then when you actually go into the rehearsals, the thing about most artists, they give you a lot of production days, because they don't like music on stage. They want it to look as if it's a band situation, so they give you plenty of time to prepare. It's up to you to use that time completely useful.
So taking this listening thing, let's find out what listening means, because it's a word we use in general English, but when you're using the word listening, you'll mean something a lot more specific. Have you always had these listening skills from a young age, or is it something that's developed as you've gone on in your career?
I think I'll find that you can definitely develop listening skills.
What does it mean, listening skills? So if you're trying to emulate another artist, obviously you need the right notes and the right rhythms, but that isn't what makes their style. It's something more than notes and rhythms. What is it you're listening for to emulate that person?
It's certain. If it's a saxophone, there'll be certain elements of that saxophone playing in its tonal quality and things like that. I've been listening for and find out whether I can emulate that or not. I mean, but then again, I've gone through the basics where, if I have to growl or I have to put a certain vibrato on it, or a
note bends.
Note bends, all of these things, all of these what I call advanced settings.
Yes.
I've made sure that I know all the advanced settings, whether you're sliding up, whether you're
So you're listening to the beginnings of notes, you listen to the ends of notes, what happens to the note in the middle.
Yeah, whether you fall off them or whether you build up to them. All of these things are part and parcel of the listening thing. But that comes with the analytic side of it. So if you, the more, you know, I tell my students all the time, please listen to as many of the greats that you can. And that,
but by listen, you mean pay attention to how they begin the notes, how they end the notes, how the note travels in between.
Yeah, the little neons, all the little stuff that, you know, makes them what they are. You know, and I mean, my dear old mum, right? She could actually phone me up and say, "Are you on that record?" And she'd only hear it once, and I'd say, "Yep, that's me." Yeah. She could. She's not a musician. She doesn't have a musician's ear. She can just hear that was my tone. That was
your character.
It's my sound. It's my sound. That was Mick Donnelly.
So taking this listening thing a bit further, you were saying to me just before this, how when you're in a performance, you kind of don't think about the audience, you think about the band. So there's this balance between listening to the detail in your own playing and the ensemble, the band. So what are you listening for when you're playing with a band? What is it that's important in a professional fine detail listening? What does that mean?
To me, basically, you've got to blend. You've got to blend with the band. If you stick out like a sore thumb, you're not blending. It's like it's like playing a dynamic far too loud in an orchestra. You know, if it's not blending, it's not right. So my whole listening aspect of playing in a band is to listen to whether it's all blending together so that when it goes out to the audience, so I'm not forgetting about the audience, what I'm saying is getting that blend correct so that when it goes out to the audience, they're getting the best listening experience that they can, right? If I'm thinking about what my playing is doing for the audience, I feel as though I've lost that. It's got to be the whole blend of the thing. It's just not about me, it's about the whole band.
It's a unit.
It's a unit. It's a complete unit, and that unit is putting it together to put out there. And that's what I focus on mainly. You know, I'm listening to the other elements of the band, and I'm picking up on certain things that they're doing, and that to me is taking your playing to a different level.
So going back to this preparation that results in not having much in the way of nerves, listening is part of that, but and how a note begins and whether it's a growl or an onset and whether it falls at the end and whether it has vibrato or it crescendos, etc. But how do you prepare in a way that you know that you're going to be technically solid, that you know you're not going to hit a bum note or a split note? Is it just repetition? Is there more to it than that?
I would say repetition is the big form when it comes to actually playing live without the aid of music, or to me repetition's got to be the way, but it's got to be repetition among the whole band.
Right.
Preparation's got to be for the whole thing. If it's a solo, that's your domain. And many a time I've taken myself away from the band, took myself into a room and prepared the solo. Whether it's a chord sequence that the keyboard player's laid down and I've gone away and went, okay, that's the best way I can get around that. Or whether it's already an established solo that I am copying for another artist.
So when you've got this solo though, and you say repetition, I know full well that you don't mean that you're going to play it 100 times the same.
No.
So tell me about repetition. What makes good repetition in practice, as opposed to just mechanically doing it again and again?
I feel as though you shouldn't really be practicing the stuff that you can't do. Right, you can do, sorry. You should be going over and over and over the stuff that you can't do, and that doesn't mean you can't play. You might get the notation right, but you might not get the feel right, you might not get the sound right. So basically, if I'm playing a solo that is well known, I will record it, listen to it, this is part of the repetition side of it. Listen to it and say, and then go, right, okay, when I listen to the original, I listen to that, there's some differences, and I need to analyse where the differences are, and then I put my bit onto there to make it sound as close to that.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the things you're focusing on as you perform and record yourself, listen, and then you re-rehearse and you probably re-record yourself, is you're listening for something beyond the notes. You're listening for the style or the feel, and what it is that creates that style or that feel, and how you can further enhance that.
The notation is the simplest thing about playing the instrument.
Yeah, I always say that to people. Notation's only ever a summary.
Yes,
it doesn't have the detail.
No, it doesn't. It's the numbers. You know, 1,
yes.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, to infinity. You know, they're just numbers. It's putting the numbers together and putting it all. Where
taking the music off the page.
Yes, you take it off and you add what was either it was great, or if it's my solo, you know, which is, you know, many of them have been recorded. It's my solo. It's really easy to emulate because you've put your own nuances in on there already.
I like that phrase you just said, where you said about adding something to the score, because very often when people are learning an instrument, they feel they have to do exactly what's on the page, and they don't feel they can add something because they feel that's wrong almost.
As long as the fundamental, or should I say, as long as the theme of the solo, in other words, if for instance it's a solo that's well known, as long as the theme is there, you can and it can be recognised by the audience, right? Because it is an integral part. They come to listen to hits, they come to listen to all of that. As long as the theme is in the ballpark, you can then pull it around a little bit and put your own little bit on it, right? And most artists will let you do that if it doesn't detract away from the solo itself. If you take it into a different direction and go, oh, you know, doesn't that sound better? You know, the artist will say, no, that's what sold 1 million albums, put it back together again. Yes. So, yes, you can put your own stamp on it, but, you know, beware. If you are going to put your own stamp on it, make sure that you do it in rehearsals. You don't do it on stage. If you do it on stage, it might become a shock to the artists themselves.
Yes.
Right?
So it's not team play, basically.
No, you're not. You've then taken it, you know, you've done all of this rehearsal, you've done all of this repetition, you've done all of this togetherness, and then suddenly you go, I'm going to throw a curveball in there, right at the end, and you do something different than what you rehearsed.
Is training in your mind an element of your rehearsal?
Yes.
So tell me what that means for you.
As in training, as in the over and over of training, as in notation? Or?
Well, it could be, do you rehearse your solo in your mind before you play it on the saxophone? Do you try and get almost like a conductor's view of the perfect performance up here before your instrument performs it?
No. No. There's two ways of doing it. Live is totally different to recording. This is my humble opinion, right? Live is totally different to recording. Recording, I will go into a studio, I don't care who it is that I'm working with, and this has been tried and tested on me, right? But I will say, I will play it through a couple of times, but it won't be in its completion, just to make sure that I'm in tune and everything's like that. But I say the first three takes, keep them all, and you will have the solo that you want. If you take anything over that, right, I am then repeating myself and trying to put together the best three bits. So
being fresh is important.
Absolutely.
Having that spontaneity.
Absolutely, spontaneity is the one that you need that there. So recording, it should be over in half an hour. If I've got a solo, it's done and dusted, right?
Yeah.
If they don't like it, I'll do it for free. Get another saxophone.
So almost there's a difference between performance and rehearsal.
Yes.
So rehearsal is about the recording yourself, it's about listening to the detail, it's about getting the expression, it's about getting the style. but when it comes to the actual performance, you want to just go for it.
Yeah, basically the performance, what you do is all of that preparation that you've done as in any team sport. You know, if you take it analogy of sport, like a football team or something like that, why do they train? They train to get all the elements right, the free kicks, the throws, the this, the that, the passing, everything. It's exactly the same. You know, being a musician is a team sport. Unless you are just a complete soloist, a concert clarinetist or something, you are a team player. You did a band.
So most of what we covered so far is about learning solos that other people have played or have particular ideas given to you. But what you have alluded to, which we haven't covered as much, is when you are creating your own solo, when you are improvising.
Mm-hmm.
So how does one practice improvisation? I think many students seem shocked when I tell them that actually you can have structured lessons in improvisation. You can start at one point and you can make progress, and it is something you can learn. How do you practice improvisation?
Simplify it. It's really easy. There's three elements of improvisation. This is my opinion, but three simple elements. You need a technique. A technique could be anything from grade 3 upwards. Right? Mm-hmm. Once you've got to grade 3 in associate board or any relative exam board, grade 3, you should then know most instruments on your chosen instrument.
Most scales, yeah.
Most of the notes.
Most of the techniques.
Most of the notes.
Yes.
So from there to there, that's the technique. So
that's almost your painter's palette. You've got the different colours that you can do something with.
So there's your technique. Obviously different levels of technique, but yes. I could take a grade 3 person and a grade 8 and teach them exactly the same when it comes to improvisation. Right?
Yes.
This doesn't include any reading whatsoever. So you've got a grade 3 that should be ample enough technique to be able to play improvisation. Then what you do is you need the knowledge, right? You need the knowledge, the tool. The tool is the knowledge, right? The knowledge comes from the teacher.
So what you're saying is improvisation isn't random. It has to be taking the notes you know with some understanding. You've got to have the knowledge. If you don't have the knowledge, you don't know where to start. Many people have come up, as teaching and said, we're going to do some improvisation. It's almost like the hyperventilate, Mm-hmm.
But it's not. If you've got the technique, then you've got the knowledge, and the knowledge should come from the teacher or your own experiences, depending on how advanced you are. And the third element is rhythm. It's rhythm. If you have no rhythm, you're not going to be able to put all of them elements together, because it's the rhythm side of it. If you can hear where the first beat of the bar is, you can improvise.
So how do you develop rhythmic interest? Because obviously, if you can hear where the first beat of the bar is, that's a start. But if you were only playing on the beats, that wouldn't be that interesting. So how do you develop rhythmic interest?
The rhythmic interest can come from the way I started, say, a workshop, is that, say we play the blues in C, I would get them to basically be able to recite the blues scale. 1, flat 3, 4, flat 5, 5, flat 7, and 1.
And the octave.
That's it. That's all I've got to know, right? So then we'll put the blues track on, and then basically I just say you play the first note. Measure 1, right? From measure 1, it's the first note. And you make the first note sound interesting. Then you go play 4 bars. And it'll be just da 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 da, whatever the beat is. And you've got to make it sound interesting on one note.
So by whatever the beat is, you don't mean pulse. You mean the rhythm from the drum section.
And then what you do is you make it interesting on your side with just one note.
So you're connecting what you play with the kit.
Yeah. With whatever is in front of you, whatever the menu is, whatever the ingredients are, in front of you. You then add your little bit of sprinkle.
So tell us about you as a performer if you're preparing for an event and you've got your own free solo. Obviously you're at the stage where things can just flow for you, but there is still such a thing as preparation for these events.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you can hear the track, obviously you can hear the rhythms that predominate the kit or that particular song, and you can integrate with those. How do you prepare your improvisation so that it is going to sound good, but it also sounds spontaneous?
Spontaneity. Just that's it. I don't prepare. If it's improvisation, there's no preparing.
So do you have certain Mick Donnelly licks, if you like?
Yes.
Do you have a bank of things that you love and you know them in all your keys, and they might crop in somewhere because you've got this vocabulary?
Yes, definitely that. But at the same time, I will try something. If you were on a 38-day, 42-day tour, you don't want to bore the band either. So if you get a little bit of a free rein and the artist says, "There's 16 bars, Mick, do something with it," you know, it's your solo. There's not a recognised solo in there. We've added 16 bars for you to do a solo. You don't want to play the same solo every night because you've got a different audience.
Is it difficult? Let's say on night 40, you imagine this in the theatre sometimes when they're doing the same show night after night. On night 40, to get a solo that you feel is still as creative and sparky as it was on night 1.
Totally. Yes, and that is, if there's anything on tour, because you know, if you've got 90 minutes to 100 minutes of music that you are performing, you might only get 3 or 4 solos of your improvised solos.
So when you've had solo several nights in a row, what creates a new spark so that, to quote you, a phrase you've used recently, you still have that fire in your belly about your solo. How do you still get it after you've done several nights?
You try to get the band to go with you.
Okay.
So what you're trying to do is you're trying to change the soup. In other words, you are the flavouring to the soup, but the base of the soup, you're trying to say, can we add a little bit of chili? Or can we add a little bit of this? And then the drummer and bass player might go, well, let's try this groove when we get there.
Okay.
So
you try and add a different spice.
Yeah, and you would do that in your sound checks or your rehearsals during the tour.
So does this come into your rehearsal as well? We were talking earlier about almost a pre-planned solo rather than an improvised one. And we were talking about repetition, and we were talking about how it's not just unique. Is that what you're doing with those as well? Are you trying different spices out to find out what happens?
The actual no. If it's a known solo, and that has to sound like that, because
so this is specifically if it's your improvisation.
Specifically, it's an improvised solo that you've been given carte blanche. You can do what you like.
Yeah.
And the only way really, you know, after 30 performances of doing 16 bars to make it sound as interesting as you can. You've got to remember the audience have only heard it once, because
yes.
if you've played in one venue and you're going 200 miles away, that audience won't. There'll be very few from. Some do travel, but I mean there'll be very few from that audience heard what you did last night, or even if they did, they'll not remember what you did.
Yes.
So you could actually get away with playing the same solo every night.
Except that audiences do know if you're inspired at that moment. They will pick up on whether.
But this is the
that
thing.
Spark is there.
The spark comes from what you tried to do with it to
yes.
make it sound good. You know, I mean, I can remember doing a live DVD and CD at the Royal Albert Hall, and just for that, as your solo was coming up, and there was this solo that had both these elements in it. It had a written solo that was well known, but at the end, the artist said, "Go for it. You're going to play out the number. You're going to play out the number and finish on your solo. That's how it's going to end.
Wow.
You're going to come down the front. You're going to do it." And it was like sort of, oh great. So, but we'd gone through, you know, we'd done plenty of rehearsal, we'd gone through a whole tour, then we get to the Royal Albert Hall, we do this thing, and it's coming up. So as it's building up close to this thing, it's going through my mind, do I go for it? Is this the time that you've got one shot at it, mate.
Yeah.
You've got one shot. So there's just that little niggle in there, and if there's any anxiety to be brought out, that's going to bring it out. And eventually, my biggest danger was thinking about it, so I stopped thinking.
So there was a risk, I suppose, that you'd play safe.
There was a risk that I would play safe, and safe would have been fine, but safe wouldn't have made it.
That wouldn't have had the fairy dust.
It wouldn't have had it wouldn't have made it nice for it. You know, it was a risk for the artist to let me do this, and I took the risk, and I went, I'll have some of this, and went away, and then it worked because that track that was live ended up on their greatest hits.
Great. So
if I hadn't took the risk, it most probably wouldn't.
So risk taking is important.
It can be.
Or your approach to risk taking.
It's your approach. So it's no good taking risks if you feel as though you haven't got the ability to do it.
So you don't want to be a bull in the china shop.
Basically, you've got to have the confidence in your own ability.
Which is all in the preparation.
Which is then you've got that very very narrow corridor of confidence and arrogance.
Yes.
So what you do is you just get it to that point where you are confident enough that it's going to work, but you don't go about talking about it to other people and be arrogant about it and say, I'm going to do this tonight. That could have been the big nail in the coffin. You know, you don't go and say, tonight I'm going to really go for it tonight. That, you know, you just keep it nice and confident inside your own thing, and then you know you're going to do it. I knew I was going to do it. I wasn't going to hold back, but I wasn't going to tell everyone I was going to do it. I just did it, and bam, it came out. And yes, but I was confident it was going to happen, so it happened. And this is it. You've got to be really, really confident in your own ability.
Okay.
And that's what will get you to that.
So we've talked about preparing a solo by detailed listening, and about recording yourself and listening to yourself as well. We've talked about improvisation and how to approach that. What about if you're learning something? Have you ever had a solo of somebody else that you've been trying to learn, and actually there's been something technically or musically that's just really frustrated you, and it's not come out as you wanted it to? How do you approach that mindset if you've got that kind of moment?
Have
you had those?
Yeah, I've had
moments?
One of them moments was with Barry White, and the solo was Just the Way You Are. And I was doing the Belgian Grammy Awards with him, and obviously that saxophone solo is one of the most famous saxophone solos on the Barry White album. So it had to be exactly the way that they did it, with no nuances, with nothing. There's no Mick Donnelly in that. And that was, and I had to do it within 2 hours. So I had to learn, I took myself away from the rest of the band, and I took myself into a room with a pair of headphones and a recorder to listen to the way that was. And that was 2 hours of intense, over and over and over, so that every single bit of that person that played the solo, was a very famous saxophone player, was emulated the way I played it. So there was no Mick Donnelly in there at all. So
obviously there was the risk of you being very anxious there. There was the risk of when you have a challenge like that if your brain is thinking, well, I will not be able to achieve it, that could be a mental block. That could actually limit your coping strategies, but more importantly, when you get that kind of mindset, limits your learning because it becomes a block. How do you handle that in that moment of pressure?
It's a case of feel the fear and do it anyway. It's one of them moments. I feel more pressure when it's my solo, because it's mine. Somebody else's solo is not so important to me.
Okay.
And I've got all the technique that I need to be able to play somebody else's solo. So again, I'm confident in that way, but at the point of I'm not as worried about someone else's solo as mine, even though I must do as good a job as I
But
can.
at any point in your career, have you had to find a coping strategy when you've been under pressure to deliver something in a short period of time, or to deliver something that at that moment in your career was a technical or musical challenge at that moment?
Coping mechanism.
What's the mindset when you're under pressure?
I'm never under pressure. That's the mindset.
Okay.
The only time that I feel under pressure is if I feel as though the band or the same musicians around me are unprepared, because I know damn well I'll always be prepared. And that's the main thing.
So it's back to preparation.
It's back to preparation again. If you are, I expect, as people expect from me, I expect from the people around me to be in the same mindset as me. If I feel as though they're not, I will get anxious. But not for me, for them, because I'm prepped.
There was a concert pianist once said to me, she took her words back later, but I don't think she should have done. She once said to me, fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
Correct. And it's right. I played at Ronnie Scott's when I was very young. Now, that's it. This was about 23-year-old. I was in the support band to an amazing American saxophonist called James Moody, who was ridiculous, and it was an absolute pleasure. He used to walk past me. We did 2 shows a night, and he used to walk past me in the corridor. You know, he used to come in, just walk past me, didn't even acknowledge me. I'm young, I don't care. And but every night, just before, he'd hear the same 2 numbers that the band were playing, because he'd turn up with somebody really famous, right? Because he was famous, we were playing at the Pizza Express or somewhere else in London, and there'd be another ridiculously famous saxophone player, like Lester Young or something like that, you know, and they'd be stood at the bar just chatting away, you know, and you think, you know, there's your arrogance when you're younger. You think they're listening to you. They're not. They just haven't seen each other for ages, but these 2 monsters stood there. And then he'd come on, pick up his saxophone, and I'd walk past him in the corridor as I go to my dressing room and he goes to his. You know, I wasn't the artist, it was somebody else. And this went on for 2 weeks. And he never said a word to us. It went on for 2 weeks. And then Ronnie Scott always used to hold a party downstairs in a private little thing for the artists and their families. And we stood at the bar, and the band that I was working with, I can't remember, it was a girl singer, up and coming girl singer. I had a fantastic band. And we're all stood at the bar, and James Moody is over there with his band, and then suddenly he starts walking towards me, right? And the bass player just nudged me like that and said, he's coming over to talk to you. He knew that I'd told him. He hasn't even said a word to me. Nudged me and said, James Moody's coming over. It looks as if he's coming to talk to you. And he came over and he put his hand out, shook his hand, and he said, listen, son. Listen, son, in America. I said, yeah. He said, listen, son. He said, you've got a great set of fingers there. Learn how to use them. And walked away. And I just went, I think I need to prep a little bit more. And that time.
So was that a turning point?
That was a big turning point. I knew I had the technique and I knew I had all of this, but he put it in a nutshell. You've got it all there, son. Learn how to use it. So I went away and learned how to use it.
Mick Donnelly, thank you very much for teaching us how to listen, how to prepare, and how to have a great set of fingers and learn how to use them.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.